Hi everybody, I'm Skip Alzheimer, and welcome to the AV Geeks Lunchtime Streaming Show. We are honored to be in the studio of this person, Irene Moon, who you might remember we did a show together in January, where she came to Raleigh, and now we are in her space in California, and she is playing this magical, you said it's Italian?
Italian.
Organ.
I have something to show you, Skip.
All right, let's see.
Some prizes of my collection.
All right.
You reach onto the shelf.
Oh, wow.
2 copies of wonderful, wonderful autobiographies by Lawrence Welk. Ta-da!
And it's signed.
Including one that's signed.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Anything else you wanted to show us
Oh,
in this amazing space?
no, maybe that's it.
Okay, that's fine.
Wait, I have to show you one more thing.
Oh yeah, hey, anytime. Go for it. I like that you're showing me non-musical equipment.
This is a portrait of a bullfighter made out of leather by Louis Moody.
Nice. And that's someone you're related to?
Yes, my uncle.
Wow. Okay. So today it's Friday, so I figured it'd be a special day. Today's theme is sound or music or hobby. So we're gonna watch films about music or sound or whether or not you're good enough to be a musician to make a career out of it. So the first film we're gonna watch is Melody and Music. The next is Science and Sound and Musical Tone. Then Music, Career or Hobby. Then Sound Fundamentals of Acoustics. And then finally, Wondering About Sound, which is an Encyclopedia Britannica film that was made in the 80s. And it actually has a great song in it. So it's going to be a toe-tapping tournament candidate for next year, 2024. As a reminder, we are voting on the current toe-tapping tournament to vote the best number one jingle. It's either the Zip Code song or Race for Your Life. And I'm going to have Irene here listen to it, and maybe some other people that are here, and they will put in their votes. But thanks for watching today. We'll be back Monday. We'll be back in the studio, hopefully Monday, if we make our flight. You can support us by hitting the thumbs up, by hitting the super thanks button, by going to ko-fi.com/avgeeks for coffee, or patreon.com/avgeeks. All those are great ways to support us. So you want to play us out?
Oh, yeah.
Irene?
Let me turn it up. Oh, my dear. What is happening?
One day, when we were practicing for a program, we learned many things about melody in music. Each time we learn a new piece of music, I ask one of the children to play the melody. But Jean wanted to know why we played the melody first. She felt sure she could play her part. But of course, the melody in any piece of music is so important that we should listen for it, even when we play other parts. So I asked Howard to play on the French horn the melody of the piece we were going to practice. Then I asked Alice to play a melody for us on the chimes. That was something like the melody Howard played, wasn't it? Did you notice how many different notes there were in the melody? Listen. Just 4 different notes. Most melodies use more than 4 different notes. But Jean thought of another one that used only 4. Just 4 different notes. What else goes into a melody besides different notes? Well, on the marimba, we can see that a melody can go up, or it can come down, and it can skip around. A melody can have words. A melody can be without words. A melody can sound high, as on a flute. Or it can sound low, as on a tuba. A melody can sound crisp and sharp. Or it can sound smooth and mellow. Did you know that different melodies can start off with the same notes? Listen. There are many different melodies that start off with those notes. Did you notice that the first 2 notes were faster when Jim played? Howard thought of still another tune that started with the same notes. Listen. Yes, changing the rhythm makes a melody sound quite different. Listen to a simple 8-note scale. Now with the same notes, but changing the rhythm. That's quite a different sounding melody, isn't it? Quite a few melodies are built on simple scales. Mary knows one. The first 2 notes of the scale are each played 3 times before we come down and go up again. Now if we add a second part to that melody, we have a pretty French folk tune built on a scale. Melodies differ from each other in many ways. Some melodies are quite short. Some melodies are longer. Wasn't that beautiful? But where do melodies come from? Well, I asked Jim to make up a melody on his cornet. It's fun to make up your own melody. And then you can make up variations. Change the melody to make it more interesting. You can make all sorts of changes in the same melody. Well, there are many more things to learn about melodies. But we felt Jean should understand by now why we thought melodies were so important. And she did. Do you remember what we've learned? Melodies use different notes that go up or come down or skip around. A melody may have words. But many do not. A melody can sound high. Or it can sound low. The notes can be crisp and sharp. Or they can be smooth and sustained. Different melodies sometimes start with the same notes in different rhythms. You can make up your own melodies. And you can have fun changing your melody to make it sound more interesting. The melody you make up doesn't have to be long or difficult. Some of the very finest melodies are simple. Let's listen again to the chimes. This is a melody from the piece we're going to rehearse. That's a very simple melody, isn't it? But one of the world's greatest composers, Johannes Brahms, used that melody in his great Symphony No. 1 in C minor. Listen as Howard plays again a melody from this symphony. Now that we all know the melody, we can enjoy an arrangement of part of the symphony by Brahms. Listen for the melody and how important it is in the music.
All sounds, whatever they are, originate as vibrations. Any substance can vibrate if it has elasticity, or the tendency to return to its usual shape after being distorted by some outside force. Sound vibrations are transmitted through various media. Sound waves reach us through the air, through a solid, or through a liquid. Sound waves spread outward like ripples on water, in all directions, fanning out from their source. This is the famous Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. We are here to take a look at one of the new exhibits on the science of sound and musical tone. Hello. You know, sound is a fascinating thing. There's so much to learn about it. And there's no better place to learn than right here at this exhibit of the science of sound and musical tone. Let's start with sound generation. How sounds are created. And to illustrate that fundamental principle, let's start with our old friend, the tuning fork. As we know, to form any sound, something has to move back and forth in quivering movements or vibrate. And it's these vibrations which form waves of sound. And these waves of sound are transmitted through solid, liquid, or air. The only medium sound can't travel through is a vacuum. The dial indicates the amount of air in the bell. As the air is pumped out, you'll notice that the sound dies. Let's suppose this panel is magnified air. The lights represent the air particles. Let's suppose, too, that sound waves created by a giant tuning fork are passing through the air. As the blade of the tuning fork vibrates, it first pushes the particles of air near it outward. These particles collide with neighboring particles, which move outward and collide with their neighbors, and so on. Then, as the blade returns to complete its vibration, the air particles rush back to fill the space left by the blade of the tuning fork. In other words, it's a bump and a rebound of air particles. Vibrations create alternate compressions and partial vacuums of air particles. When the vibrations or sound waves stop, the air is exactly as it was. Yet the sound waves have traveled completely through it. Sound travels approximately 1,100 feet per second through the air. Of course, light travels very much faster. That's why the flash of lightning is often seen before you hear the accompanying thunder. Sound travels roughly 4 times faster in water, about 4,800 feet per second. Knowing the speed of sound in water helps the sonar engineer in the submarine to navigate underwater. Now the sound must be received or heard by the ear. We really have 6 ears, 3 on each side. The outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. The outer ear catches the sound waves and directs them along the auditory canal, where they bombard the eardrum, setting up vibrations that are passed on to 3 tiny bones in the middle ear: the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. With increased force, the sound waves enter the compressed fluid of the inner ear, called the cochlea, where sounds are received and transformed into nerve impulses racing to the brain. No one knows exactly how this happens, but the mechanism that transforms this sound into nerve impulses is called the basilar membrane, uncoiled here to study it better. This membrane, which is actually very tiny, supports about 23,000 hair-like nerve endings. When any part of it vibrates, nerve endings are thrust against the overhanging tectorial membrane, and we hear. Of course, we can't see sound waves, but scientists have developed an instrument which translates sound waves into visual patterns. This instrument is called an oscilloscope. The lines or pattern you see here is, in effect, a picture of my voice. The movement of these lines indicates, among other things, the number of vibrations per second that the sound of my voice creates. Every different sound or tone creates a different number of vibrations per second, and it is the number of vibrations per second that determines the pitch of a tone. Here's another pattern created by a pure musical tone. It's called a sine wave. Watch the oscilloscope as this tone creates more vibrations per second, or a higher pitch than the one just played. Watch the oscilloscope again. See how this tone creates fewer vibrations, or a lower pitch. Here's another example of pitch or frequency: a bicycle wheel and a playing card. The card is set into vibration by the rotating spokes. When the rotating wheel is speeded up, the card vibrates more rapidly, and your ear recognizes a higher pitch than when the wheel rotates more slowly. The pitch falls as the speed decreases. Intensity or loudness can also be seen on the oscilloscope by the height of the sine wave or curve. At the opening of the film, we heard the bark of a dog, the noise of a car, the music of a violin. Now, let's discuss these different kinds of sound. One is noise, like you heard from the dog and the car. Another is musical tone. Watch the oscilloscope. You can see how noise sends out irregular vibrations. Now, see how musical tones produce a regular-looking sound wave. The instrument sends out regular vibrations. Whenever we hear any musical sound, we're actually hearing a complex combination of fundamental or basic tone and harmonics or overtones. These harmonics or overtones are highly important. They affect the quality of a tone because it's the difference in the number and intensity of harmonics or overtones that makes a violin sound different from a clarinet, a trumpet sound different from an oboe, and so forth. This Hammond organ here in the museum is an ideal instrument upon which to demonstrate fundamentals and overtones, because use of the drawbars or tone bars permits us to isolate the fundamental tone from harmonics. Or we can blend the fundamental tone with combinations of harmonics or overtones to obtain thousands of variations of musical tones. There's an animated film within this exhibit which explains this very well. Let's go take a look at it.
Interested in music? Hammond gives the organist the whole orchestra to work with in these tone bars. Every musician, in fact just about everybody, would like to have his own orchestra to conduct. Of course, they'd like to play the instruments too. The orchestra is yours. Let's start with our string section. That's a picture of what the strings look like.
Hold on, Maestro. If you were a conductor, that is, if you were an orchestra, you could vary the harmony, change the tone color according to your taste.
Indeed you can. Like flutes? Just pucker up your white tone bars and blow. Like it? Invite a few more friends. Call out the whole orchestra. Perhaps you prefer the reeds. Gentlemen, a little light reed work, please. Let's do it in blue.
A short tour, Professor? Say a little percussion?
Allow me. How about drums? Xylophones.
So you're not only all the sections of the orchestra, you're the conductor too.
Like I said, friend, you are the orchestra.
Interesting story. Now let's see how musical tone is generated by various instruments. The percussion instruments, such as the drum, are probably the oldest instruments of all. Skin is stretched tightly across either one or both ends of a hollow cylinder. When the drum head is rapped sharply, it vibrates. Drums may sound lower or higher according to their size and tension of their skin. The musical tones of a violin and other bowed string instruments are generated by pulling the bow back and forth over the strings, causing the strings to vibrate. At the same time that one hand moves the bow, the fingers of the other hand press the strings against the fingerboard to determine the pitch of the tone. The brass slide trombone represents a still different method of tone generation. The player blows into the mouthpiece and his lips act as the vibrator to generate the trombone tone. Different pitches are made by altering the position of the slide and changing the lippage. The clarinet is a member of the woodwind family. It's a reed instrument consisting of a cylindrical tube with a bell-shaped opening at one end and a mouthpiece at the other. The mouthpiece has a flat cane reed attached. It vibrates when blown, thus generating a tone. The tube contains open holes and holes covered by keys. The fingers open and close the holes and manipulate the keys to change the pitch of the clarinet tone. The Greeks had an early form of pipe organ as far back as 500 BC. Pipe organs, as we know them today, generate tone much in the same manner as the wind-blown instruments, the flute, for example. In the pipe organ, wind is driven over pipes of varying lengths. The length of the pipe determines the pitch. The electric organ, like this one we've been using here at the Museum of Science and Industry, was invented by Lawrence Hammond in 1935. It introduced a completely new method of electrical tone generation known as the tone wheel generator. When I pull out one of these tone bars and press a key, a minute electrical current generated in the organ is carried along a wire to the amplification system. This amplified current is in turn connected to speakers whose vibrations in the air produce audible musical sounds. Thus, the organ's operation is entirely electrical in character until the final speaker is reached. Now let's look at the tone generator and see how it produces these minute electrical currents. This cutaway section of the tone wheel generator shows how this disc or tone wheel is so placed that it rotates or spins right next to a magnet. Notice that the magnet has a coil of wire wrapped around it. Also note that the tone wheels are not true circles, but have a number of high spots or notches around the edges. As the discs rotate, they do not touch the magnets, but pass very close to them. Each time a high spot passes the magnet, it induces or generates a minute electrical current in the coil. One of the wheels rotates so that 440 high spots pass the magnet each second, generating a varying current, which when it activates the speaker, causes it to vibrate at 440 vibrations per second, which is designated A on the musical scale. The generator in this organ has 86 tone wheels, all of which are permanently geared together and driven by a constant speed motor. Because the tone wheels are driven by a constant speed motor, the pitch of the tones generated remain constant, and no tuning is ever required. The high spots on the tone wheels are so shaped that pure tones are generated. That means tones that have no harmonic or overtones of their own. Now, this purity is essential in order to attain pleasing tonal mixtures between fundamental tone and harmonics through the use of the drawbar. When a key is depressed, it closes 9 small electrical switch contacts. There are 9 such contacts under every playing key on the organ. Now, these contacts are connected to appropriate generator magnets as well as to the drawbars. The settings of the drawbars determine the intensities of the small electrical currents generated by the tone wheels. When a drawbar is pulled out all the way, it generates a current of greater intensity, thereby making that tone louder than if the drawbar or tone bar were pulled out only part way. Varied drawbar settings, then, actually call on up to 9 different tones at one time, each tone's loudness or intensity being determined by how far the drawbar is pulled out. Thus, thinking of 9 different drawbars, each with 8 different positions of intensity or loudness, it's mathematically possible to create literally thousands of tones. Or, on a more practical basis, an individualized variety of organ or orchestral tone effects. So we've covered what musical tone is and how it's generated. We've covered pitch. Pitch is determined by the number of vibrations created within a given length of time. Intensity is the loudness or the softness of the tone. Quality is what distinguishes one tone from another. A drum from a violin, an oboe from a trombone, a harp from a tuning fork. And that's where we started, at this interesting exhibit of Chicago's Museum of Science and Industry. But just hearing sound and musical tone is only half the real pleasure and satisfaction of music. The other half is in your creating sound, pleasant sound, musical sound.
Friends and neighbors sometimes encourage us to consider careers in music, but it's always wise to check their judgment. Ken Anderson knew this. That's why he stopped in the middle of a music lesson to ask me,
Well, Mr. Zabel, I've been thinking about what part music would play in my life. Should I try for it? Should I go after a concert career?
is that what you want?
Well, sure. Music is, well, it's what I want. Nothing else counts as much as music.
I think I understand, Ken. There are others who feel as you do, too.
Well, then, should I try to become a concert artist?
Well, I really don't think I should answer that question for you, Ken. But perhaps I can help you find the answer for yourself. Let's begin with a less difficult question. Where can you find out more about the various careers in music? There are many, you know.
Are you trying to tell me that I'm not good enough for a concert career?
On the contrary, you play very well, Ken. Few years hard work, very hard work, and you might become a performer of professional caliber. Still, you might be happier in some other field of music. You see what I mean? Let's take it from the cantabile. Ken's question about a career in music started me thinking. And instead of listening, I was remembering other students and their answers. Mary Winters wasn't a great artist, but she has set out on a concert career, and she could surprise everybody and hit the top. There have been many like Jimmy Hallquist, who have learned to play well enough for their own pleasure, but they regard themselves, and rightly, as musical amateurs. And there have been many in my classes who have found musical performance just too much. Howard Parnell could never really learn to play an instrument. But he did learn to listen to music, and the enjoyment of music became an important part of his life. Now, Ken was facing the question.
You know, Mrs. Abel, about what part music would play in my life, maybe I'd better have a talk with Mr. Wilkinson.
Your guidance counselor?
Uh-huh.
It's a good idea. He'll be able to tell you more about music as a vocation, and more about yourself, too.
Well, I'll see him after school today, and I'll let you know how it goes.
Ken, along with other students, took a series of musical aptitude tests given by the guidance counselor.
This part of the test is concerned with pitch discrimination. You'll hear a series of 3 notes. You're to write down which of the notes is lowest in pitch. All right, here we go.
Problem number 1. Number 2. Number 3.
Of course, such tests need careful interpretation by someone skilled in testing and guidance. Mr. Wilkinson told Ken that his test clearly indicated musical ability, that he might well consider music as a vocation. Mr. Wilkinson suggested that Ken go to the library to find out more about opportunities and requirements in various careers in music. As he read, Ken began to learn something about himself, about how well suited he was to the career he had in mind. Looking beyond the printed page, he could picture himself. Would he like the long hours of practice to prepare himself for a career? Not just at first, but indefinitely, as long as he continued performing in public. Could he perform for the critics? Could he stand the pressure of having to play for their demanding ears? And if the critics approved, would he then enjoy the endless touring, living in Pullmans and hotels, traveling from city to city between concerts? As he read, Ken learned that most musical careers are difficult and competitive. He learned more when he interviewed professional musicians.
Sure, I studied like anybody else. You gotta know music in this business, both popular and classical. And then there's this job and that with small combos, knocking around, one-night stands. Pretty tough, son. I'll make it someday, though. Start my own band, develop a new style, and I'll be in. Maybe.
Big symphonies usually have training orchestras you can get into. Already in music school, I was in one. And I had a union card. That you have to have in most orchestras. Well, whenever there was a vacancy in the symphony, they would send you out to audition. So we would go and audition. Very good, they would say. And then they would hire somebody else. Well, finally, they hired me down here. It isn't a major orchestra, this one. I have to take pupils mornings to help out. But then there are still the big symphonies. I can still go audition.
Well, as you know, I've been dead set on composing for a long time. I have composed, as far as that goes, but will anybody perform my works? Of course, I make a good living, writing special arrangements for popular orchestras and scoring radio shows and TV dramas. But I'm not composing. I'm not doing what I really want to do. Do you understand?
Well, I'm working my way up. Of course, I had to get some engineering background as well as music. Then I signed on in a small town station. After a while, I moved over here as music librarian. Now I'm on the turntables. I make up the list for a couple of shows a week. Music director, that's me. Someday.
Yes, Ken learned about many careers in music, and careers that combine music with other abilities, with mechanical skill, with sales ability. Ken learned much from looking into such vocations. After his reading and investigation, Ken came to see me about another important career that had been very much on his mind.
I wonder if you tell me something about teaching.
You know, I was worried that you wouldn't ask me about that. Yes, music teaching has turned out to be a very satisfying career as far as I'm concerned. Very satisfying. You see, a music teacher has to have a special kind of training. He needs to know how to inspire other people to enjoy music. And when you have some success in inspiring others, you just naturally feel inspired yourself.
I think I understand. Thanks a lot.
Yes, teaching was another career that Ken investigated further in finding how his abilities and interests measured up, finding his own answer to the question, what part shall music play in my life? You know, each of us has some aptitude for music. Whether it's performing, or teaching, or just listening. And each of us can have a richer life by finding in it a definite place for music.
A phenomenon called refraction. After sunset, over calm water, the air cools most rapidly at lower levels. At such times, distant sounds seem unusually loud. This is an example of refraction. Since the portions of sound waves near the surface travel more slowly through the cooler air near the water, their upper portions that would normally be unheard are bent down toward the surface of the water, and the wave is thus focused and strengthened. We have seen how sound originates and how it is transmitted. Let us now see how these compressional waves produce the sensation of sound. They are first collected by the outer ear and directed by it to the eardrum. The eardrum, like any other diaphragm, is influenced by changes in pressure, such as those produced by longitudinal waves in air or other fluid media. Sound waves, therefore, result in vibrations of this eardrum. Beyond the eardrum is a cavity called the middle ear. Here are located 3 small bones which transmit the vibrations of the eardrum to the inner ear. The latter consists of a spiral-shaped cavity filled with a liquid in which the bones of the middle ear set up vibrations. Along a membrane which separates the liquid into 2 parts are located the auditory nerve endings. Due to the structure of the ear mechanism, the vibrations of low pitch excite the innermost nerves, while those of high pitch excite the nerves nearest to the opening into the middle ear. These excited nerve endings transmit the sound impulse along the auditory nerve to the brain. Not until the impulses arrive at the brain do we experience the sensation of hearing. Let us consider the sensitivity of the human ear. In place of loudness, which is subjective, we will use alternating pressure in the sound field, measured in dynes per square centimeter. The audible intensity range of the normal human ear extends from the flutter of leaves to artillery gunfire. The audible frequency range capable of reception and interpretation extends from about 20 cycles per second to about 20,000 cycles, a range somewhat greater than that of the piano scale. Individuals differ considerably in their hearing acuteness. Modern electrical reproduction approaches the audible frequency limits of the original sound employed. You now hear my voice under normal conditions of reproduction. I will change the amplification to a lower but unnatural volume. You observe a change in the quality of my voice. The low frequencies appear to be less prominent. Now I will eliminate all frequencies that lie below 300. You notice the unnaturalness of my voice, particularly the vowels, when reproduced under these conditions. Next, I will eliminate the frequencies that lie above 3,000. Again, you notice a change in the quality of my voice, especially in the consonants. Now I will eliminate the low and high frequencies at the same time. In this case, both the vowel and consonant sounds are affected. Note the effect of eliminating the extreme frequencies in the reproduction of music. Another kind of attenuation occurs out of doors. We can identify but a few of the band instruments, distinguishing only those within a limited frequency range. This is because the intervening distance has reduced the intensity of some of the original sound waves to a point where the crowd noise interferes, while some of it has fallen below the threshold of hearing. How different is the sound of a band close at hand, when our ears receive the sound waves well above the threshold of hearing and free from interference of crowd noise. We can distinguish the wide range of frequency produced by the instruments. When sound waves are generated nearby in the open air and no reflecting surfaces interfere, the sound waves are transmitted direct and without alteration. When such sound waves encounter an obstruction, echoes are often produced. This is due to the fact that sound waves are reflected by large obstructing surfaces, just as the waves on the surface of quiet water are reflected when they strike the bank. A similar phenomenon occurs indoors. The direct waves are supplemented by successive reflected waves. This is called reverberation. On striking a wall, part of the energy of the wave is absorbed and changed into heat, part is transmitted through the wall, but a sound wave somewhat weakened is reflected. These waves pass back and forth from wall to wall until their energy is dissipated. You have been hearing this explanation under optimum conditions. We will line the walls with a hard, non-absorbing surface. And you hear my voice under conditions of extreme reverberation. The reflected waves pass back and forth from wall to wall many times before they are dissipated. Now you hear my voice in a room where thick, porous material on the walls is absorbing nearly all the sound wave energy. There is virtually no reflection, and my voice loses the live quality characteristic of indoor speech. Curved surfaces in auditoriums are often detrimental to good room acoustics. Such surfaces reflect and focus the sound waves, producing loud echoes that follow the original sound by a fraction of a second, thus interfering with the clear reception of the sound. Our increasing knowledge of sound is constantly contributing to our enjoyment in such ways as the improvement of acoustics in lecture halls and theaters. But it has been the help of electrical advances that has made possible the most important progress in the communication of ideas through sound. Electricity faithfully transforms these fluttering air beats into lightning-fast impulses of controlled amplitude. Thus, sound communication becomes instantly available through the telephone and radio to all parts of the world. And by electrical recording and reproduction,
Okay, ready? Tape's rolling. This is Wondering About Sound, take 1.
Sound.
Sound. Sound. Sound. Sound. Sound. Sound. Sound.
Everybody gather round, let's learn about the world of sound.
Sounds are soft. Sounds are loud.
Like the sound that's made by a cheering crowd.
Almost everywhere you go, you'll hear some sound. High.
Or low.
Loud. Or soft. Near. Or far. Sounds are everywhere you are.
How our sounds made you wonder. The rustling wind and the thunder.
There's a simple explanation, and it has to do with vibration.
Vibration occurs when something is made to move back and forth real quick, like the strings on a guitar when a player begins to pick. And when these strings are strung, can you see them move around? What happens? The strings vibrate. That's what creates
The sound. Sound. Sound.
Every sound that you may hear is caused by vibration.
Is that clear?
Now we'll do a review for you, so if it isn't, have no fear.
When you hit a drum,
Its skin
vibrates. When cymbals crash, they both vibrate.
When you tap a fork like this, it vibrates and makes a dull, low hum. Vibration creates sounds the same way with guitars, cymbals, and drums. When you hear the lunch bell ring, vibrations cause that too. Take time out, listen to the sounds vibrations create around you. Air passes over your vocal cords, so they vibrate when you talk.
It's the same with all the animals as they bark
And growl.
and squawk.
Throw a pebble into water and see those ripples there. Just like ripples in the water, sound waves move through the air.
But sound waves travel in all directions, and your ears are used for the collection of sounds that occur all around you. Now listen close, you'll hear sounds around you. Inside your ear is your eardrum, a wall of skin that stretches, and every sound that enters your ear, the eardrum surely catches.
Now there are 3 small bones inside your ear that you have to have if you want to hear. Because when your eardrum starts to vibrate, these bones begin to move. So repeat after me.
Repeat after me.
And we'll name each bone. 1,
2, 3.
They're called the hammer,
Hammer.
the anvil,
Anvil.
the stirrup.
Stirrup.
One more time. The hammer,
Hammer.
the anvil,
Anvil.
the stirrup.
Stirrup.
That's it.
Now, some sounds that you hear can be harmful to your ear, like when you have the volume turned up real loud on your radio. Ow! Video game sounds, too, can hurt your ears. You know it's true. Too long without a break can cause your head to ache.
But now these are being used so his ears won't get abused by the constant loud engine whine of big airplanes moving down the line. Sounds are also helpful, just like this smoke alarm.
Sounds wake us and warn us and keep us safe from harm.
Throw a pebble into water and see those ripples growing. If something happens to cross their path, the ripples just keep going. And it's just the same with sound waves. When objects get in their way, they go above, below, around, or through.
And here's something else that sound waves can do. Besides just moving through the air, they can travel underwater too.
Sound waves can also travel through metal, wood, and brick. Sound waves move well through solid objects. It's not a magic trick.
Metal.
Wood.
Brick. Sounds are high.
Sounds are low.
There are many things about sound to know, like when we hear a sound that's high, we say it has a high pitch.
And when we hear a sound that's low,
We say it has a low pitch. Now what is the pitch of this sound? 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 Almost everywhere you go, you'll hear some sound high or low, loud or soft, near or far. Sounds are everywhere you are.
All the sounds that you may hear are caused by vibration.
Is that clear?
Vibrations create sound waves that move like ripples on a lake once flat. Sound waves are collected by your ear, and basically that is how you hear
sound.
Is it loud?
Sound. Is it soft? Sound.
Is it low?